On a quiet afternoon, the sky was covered in gray clouds, and it was during this time that I and my two friends received a mysterious envelope. These envelopes were plain, sealed with wax but had no mark, and arrived at our homes without indicating who sent them. Inside, we found invitations on thick, aged paper, inviting us to an auction that promised items of unimaginable rarity. The catch was that the bids required were personal, not monetary. I was initially skeptical about the authenticity of the auction. My room, filled with ancient books and artifacts and lit by a single lamp, was where I pondered the possibilities of such an auction. The idea of bidding with something personal instead of money intrigued me. I began to wonder about the types of items that would necessitate such a unique form of currency. Through research and investigation, I confirmed the authenticity of the auction, an event that showed up throughout time to only a select few. Some of the most powerful names throughout history were rumored to have been invited: Sargon of Mesopotamia, Caesar Augustus, Napoleon Bonaparte, and several highly influential leaders of the 20th century. My friend Jamie, known for her love of challenges, was immediately excited by the invitation. Her study, cluttered with puzzle boxes and cryptographic tools, was a testament to her adventurous spirit. The concept of an auction trading in the human essence instead of money was extraordinary, and she was eager to uncover the mysteries behind the auction's unusual requirements. Casey, the most logical and skeptical among us, considered the invitation with a critical eye. An esteemed master of physics and biology, Casey was initially doubtful of the idea of bidding with intangible assets. However, the lure of the unknown and the possibility that scientific mysteries could be explained by a simple winning bid piqued his curiosity. I soon discovered that he would indeed join me, if not as an active bidder, then as a scientific witness to the auction's fabled legend. Driven by curiosity and the thrill of the unknown, we decided to attend the auction together. We set out as the sun began to set. Our journey took us to the outskirts of the city, where an abandoned mansion stood against the twilight sky. We walked up the path to the entrance, steadying ourselves for the night's agenda. In a few moments, we would bear witness to an event reserved for only the most prestigious and deserving. The mansion's heavy wooden door opened as if it had been waiting for us, adding to our apprehension. Inside, the air was stale, and dust motes floated in the beams of light that managed to pierce through the boarded-up windows. Despite its faded state and the dust covering its once opulent interior, the mansion felt as if it were aware of our presence. We moved through the silent halls, guided only by the dim light of candlelights, until we reached the grand ballroom. This room was set up for the auction, with chairs arranged in neat rows facing a raised platform for the auctioneer. Dust covered every surface in the ballroom, hinting at the grandeur that had faded over time. The air felt still with anticipation from the other attendees that sat in the chairs awaiting the auction to commence. The auctioneer, a man in a green wool suit, wearing a masquerade mask of gold, entered. His authoritative voice immediately grabbed everyone's attention as he explained the auction's rules. It wasn't money we'd be bidding with, but with our essence. Personal fears, secrets, and pieces of our most cherished memories. The first item, a simple silver locket, was introduced by the auctioneer, displayed in a worn oak box with red felt lining. Its power promised to reveal anyone's deepest secret to the wearer. The idea of exposing such a personal part of oneself made the physical act of bidding unnecessary. Instead, the battle was internal, with each person weighing their willingness to part with an intimate moment from their lives. For a moment, I thought of my wedding night with my wife. Images of our lovemaking overcame my thoughts. The experience was enhanced. I could smell her perfume and taste the sweat upon her body. But I was soon ejected from the moment, as the auctioneer had found something more alluring from the crowd. The notion was unsettling, however. Jamie found her own experience fascinating, albeit with a degree of caution. At the same time, I watched as Casey struggled to reconcile his logical mindset, as he too had shared something intimate with the auctioneer. The auctioneer seemed to understand the silent bids, acknowledging them with nods. The atmosphere grew tense as the stakes increased, not in monetary items, but in how much of our inner selves we were prepared to offer. When a middle-aged man finally won the locket, his reaction was a complex mix of triumph and immediate regret. His hands shook as he accepted the locket, and despite his attempt to appear unfazed, a brief look of loss was evident. This moment shifted the mood among us. The initial excitement faded into a more profound realization of the auction stakes. We were not merely observers, but participants in a deep psychological exchange. Realizing that we were trading parts of ourselves that made us into who we were. It became clear that the auction was more than an exchange of rare items. It was an exploration into the depths of our desires and fears. With his grand appearance, the auctioneer played a key role in this exploration, challenging us to confront the very fabric of our beings. The atmosphere in the ballroom changed as the night progressed. Initially, there was a sense of excitement, but this slowly turned into unease. The lighting in the room became dimmer, and people started to close in on themselves, perhaps feeling the weight of the auction's progression. The auctioneer introduced a diary next. It had a plain, worn leather cover. Despite its appearance, the auctioneer explained that the diary could record future regrets. This explanation caused a notable reaction among us. The room fell silent as we processed the implications. The steady auctioneer's voice made the diary's capabilities seem even more extraordinary. Jamie, Casey, and I exchanged looks that conveyed a mix of fear and intrigue. Knowing our future regrets today meant one might alter the course of their journey through life, and thus be eternally content or happy. During the bidding for the diary, the room was tense. Everyone seemed lost in thought, weighing the value of understanding their future mistakes against the burden of such knowledge. The allure of the diary was clear, but so was the heavy responsibility it represented. This time, my mind raced with the memories of my dark bedroom when I was 5 years old. I could feel my pulse quicken as my young eye made creatures out of the shadows. The sounds of the house made me shake in fear as I imagined vile, murderous things just beyond my door. And just like the last time, I snapped out of the memory as a young woman stood and accepted the diary. Her hands shook slightly, and her expression revealed terror, indicating the gravity of the moment she had just relived. The auctioneer then presented a key. It looked ordinary, but its promised ability was anything but. The key was said to unlock the potential to achieve one's greatest desires, with a significant drawback. It would isolate its owner from human connections forever. The room's mood shifted as we considered the consequences of such isolation in pursuing our ambitions. This auction I had no desire for, and was relieved when no thought or feeling came over me. However, I could see Casey was lost deep in thought and perhaps bidding despite his early reluctance. After several minutes, a middle-aged man stood to collect the key. His expression was determined, accepting the award and the solitude it entailed as the price for his desires. The moment he placed a hand on the key, people seemed to instantly turn away. I found myself averting my gaze and quickly dismissing any future thought regarding the man. As the auction continued, the sense of being drawn into something inescapable grew. Among others, Jamie and Casey were increasingly obsessed with the items offered. This was accompanied by realizing what we were willing to exchange for these items, parts of our humanity and our connections to others. The auction had evolved from a simple bidding for rare items into a reflective experience. It forced us to confront our values and the extent to which we're willing to go to fulfill our desires. The auction's climax centered on a mirror with a plain wooden frame, but unusual properties. The auctioneer described it as able to reflect not our external appearance, but see anywhere or anytime that we wished. This description caught everyone's attention, including me. Initially, the bids were cautious, reflecting our collective apprehension, but soon grew into a fervent urgency to win. Each of us was driven by impulse and desire, a want that seemed to outweigh rational thought. I looked to the crowd, who seemed to be craven for the mirror. A few fights broke out, and one woman tried to seize the mirror before being kicked by the auctioneer. The highest bid was made by a collector who smashed his face onto the back of a chair, losing all his front teeth in the process. His approach to claiming the mirror was marked by a noticeable shift in confidence as he smiled through blood-pursed lips. After the auction ended, the transition back to everyday life was jarring for us. Despite the world outside continuing as if nothing had changed, for us, everything felt different. Our daily routines resumed, but there was a persistent sense of disconnection, as if we were slightly out of sync with the rest of the world. The excitement was no longer there when I returned to my collection of artifacts and books, which had always been a source of joy and pride. I felt hollow and incomplete. I and my friends had an opportunity to obtain world-changing artifacts, and yet we returned empty-handed. Jamie soon took to drinking, selling her vast collection to support her habit. She would die 4 years later in a horrible automotive accident. Casey dropped out of teaching and found himself pursuing clubs that dabbled in the occult. He was arrested 2 years after the auction for murder and was stabbed to death in his holding cell. It's been 10 years now, and rumors of another auction began to circulate, bringing a mix of curiosity and apprehension. The thought of diving back into that world was both enticing and terrifying, prompting me to reflect on whether the auction was a singular experience or part of a recurring cycle of desire and sacrifice.